Here's something that surprises almost everyone. An oral probiotic capsule colonizes the vaginal and uterine microbiome just as effectively as a vaginally administered product. Same colonization after 30 days, regardless of the route, which raises the question, if bacteria you swallow end up in your reproductive tract, what else is talking to it? In part 2, Ronny Szelinsky explains the feedback loop between your estrogen levels and your gynecological bacteria, including a concept called the estrobolome, which suggests the microbial community around your ovaries may actually be influencing how much estrogen you produce. We get into the product his team built from scratch, 6 specific strains, selected after sequencing the microbiomes of fertile and infertile women side by side. And we end somewhere unexpected, with what happens to a woman's microbiome with every baby she has. It only goes in one direction, and the mechanism behind it involves what the baby receives in the first seconds of life.
Welcome back to Biohacking Eve, Health Optimization for Women with Judith Miller, where we shine a light on everything that will help you reach your best self as a woman, as unique and individual as only you can be. Live long and prosper, my friend.
In part 1 of this conversation with Ronny Szelinsky, founder of Get Happy, we talked about what the gynecological microbiome actually is, why lactobacillus dominance, not diversity, is the mark of a healthy vaginal and uterine environment, and how a dysbiotic microbiome can silently undermine fertility even when there are no symptoms. We covered the discovery that the uterus is not sterile, and how chronic inflammation in the reproductive tract attacks sperm and prevents embryo implantation. Now in part 2, we go deeper into the hormone-microbiome relationship, explore the emerging concept of the estrobolome, and get into the science behind Get Happy's 6-strain oral probiotic formula.
You mentioned something really interesting around how the hormones are impacting the microbiome and vice versa. How does that work in practice in layman's terms?
Yes, so this is like also a topic that is so not like 100% clear. I can just say what we know so far. So what we know is that we have like mainly connection to estradiol and estrogen, which seems to be the main important hormone when we're talking about the gynecological and reproductive microbiome. So what we see is, especially in the aging process, for example, every listener already knows. So we have a massive and really rapid and fast decline in the estrogen levels with entering the menopause. And now from science, we know that it leads to different things like getting, and this is like a biological really bad situation because all the protection that you had over, let's say 40, 50 years. So you will lose this protective situation not over 30 years, you will lose it within a really, really short period. And this is a massive problem there. So nearly from year one to another, you start to have a higher risk for nearly everything. Like bone health will decline, your cardiovascular health will decline, etc. They're like nearly everything is somehow affected. And the situation that we see connected to the microbial system is that these tissues, especially the uteral and the vaginal tissues, which is like the basic living ground for the bacteria, they are connected in their thickness to the estrogen levels. And the lower the estrogen levels are, so when they decline, the thickness will shrink more and more and more. And this is like going really fast. This is why, for example, women that are in menopause, from nearly day one to another, they will experience having UTIs like all the time. There are like thousands and thousands of women that have this problem and they never had it before. From one year to another, they start to get UTI problems and bladder infections like all the time. And this is because this layer is getting thinner. And the thinner the layer is, you also have a, let's say, suboptimal situation where we're talking about this whole how the viscosity of it is, of the cervix that is on it. And because the thickness is getting thinner, and also the cervix is getting thinner, so the layer that is actually should be thick and soft is getting thinner and also harder. That's also why women in their, or especially after the menopause, experience vaginal dryness a lot and experience pain while having sexual intercourse, because this layer is actually getting smaller and it's losing the softness. And this is a problem that is not just affecting viscosity, for example, it's also affecting the microbiome, because the bacteria that are living on it, now they're losing their living ground. The thing is, what we see is that bacteria are the other driver for this layer, for this tissue, because they produce postbiotics that are able to have impact on the growth of this tissue, also on the thickness. And when we see that we have two situations right now that are affecting it, the basic logic that we are doing research on right now is, will we somehow be able to have a non-hormonal way, not talking about an HRT, hormonal replacement therapy, because a lot of people don't want it, even if we have new science on it, yet still a lot of people are afraid of it and they don't want any like outer impact on their hormones. Could there be another way to keep up the system by bringing the right bacteria in? Because typically you will lose them. You will lose the bacteria when the estrogen levels are declining because they lose their living ground. But if you bring in the right bacteria and they are producing the right postbiotics and have an impact on the system, the hormonal situation will not impact the system that much than it would do with not bringing in the right bacteria. And we keep it up over this impact factor, which is way, way more easy, enjoyable. There are no side effects. It's like a totally convenient, easygoing way of keeping the system in a good and more healthy state, and then having like this hormonal impact. And that is the basic mechanism behind it. And that is so interesting.
At the same time, as we said, once people go into menopause, obviously there's so many other factors. There's cardiovascular health, there's cognitive function, etc., that is impacted by hormones. So not talking people out of HRT, I think it's something to be looked at in total. There was one term that keeps cropping up, the estrobolome. What is that?
The estrobolome is something which is really new. This is a term that was like just existing for a really short time. And I can just say what basically the theory is, because we don't have a final solution, or actually we don't have a clue how it's going in detail. We just know that it seems to be there.
It says that. I love it when it says, we don't know what's going on. Let's find out.
Yeah, then it would be just guessing, but I can tell you what the basic theory is. The estrobolome, it seems to be a situation that, like, from the estradiol producing system in like the ovaries. There we see that the ovaries also, they have like a specific microbiome, which is connected to the uterus and the vaginal microbiome. Like it's comparable species, huge crossover. And they call this specific surrounding bacteria and system, they call it the estrobolome, because this seems to impact the production of estrogen. And we are not talking about like this whole, what is the ovary and everything, but we know actually that there are different systems in the human body where hormones are produced. And from the logical perspective, it absolutely makes sense that if you have a system that is hormonal producing, and this is surrounded by microbes, the microbes will actually be the main driver for how healthy the system is, how healthy the tissue is, how healthy the cervix is. And it will have a healthy health impact. And if impact on the system that is producing hormones is given by bacteria, we know that bad bacteria also can shift the system into a more negative state. So that's what we see when people, for example, take our bacteria and they take what we developed, they start to have more regular cycles because the hormonal situation is impacted. We don't know in every detail how this is going, and it's also a bit different from person to person because also the microbiomes can be a bit different and the situation will be a bit different from woman to woman. But what we know is that when we keep a stable lactobacilli dominated situation up, it also will have a positive impact on the hormonal situation of a woman, especially on that's what I said also in the question before, the estradiol situation, which is the main like biological hand-in-hand giver for the microbiome in the gynecological tract. And this is basically what the theory of the estrobolome is, where we see also that it seems to be somehow modulated also by the gut, because people also talk about the gut microbiome when we're talking about the estrobolome. And there we see that there is also a crossover between the gynecological tract and the gut microbiome. And it is somehow going hand in hand. And this is what in the early beginning of our talk, I just said there are postbiotics, and these postbiotics, they seem to be signal givers for each other. It seems like strains are producing postbiotic products that are giving growth signals to specific other strains. Even if the strain is a different species, it can give growth factors to the other strain. And this is where we see that maybe, that's the theory, from the biological side, there are bacteria that have to be in the body because they're not just important for their own function and their own system, they're also important because they are actually the voices, like shouting out to the other systems that are also colonized by bacteria and the growth of the right bacteria over there. And this is like this thing going hand in hand in the estrobolome between the gut and the gynecological system.
Let's turn to the various solutions that you're building, because I know you've got a couple of pillars that you're looking at.
What we have for the first solution that we are talking about is we were thinking about fertility because, as I said, so we were seeing this huge decline in birth rates. And we thought, okay, maybe when we talk about vaginal health, like there are so many companies right now globally that are talking about the vaginal microbiome. So we are not the only ones. We are one of the few that are talking about fertility. And fertility is something that is connected to the vaginal health and also the endometrial health. The most people that are talking about the vaginal microbiome, because I think that a lot of people that are talking about it, they don't have a clue what it actually is. So what they tell you is that it's about vaginal and intimate health. It's about like having a normal odor, having just a normal discharge, like nothing that is irregular. And this is important for sure. When you're talking about, okay, you have like unusual discharge, it's maybe also a different viscosity or thickness. It's also like having a strange smell or something. You should think about the microbiome for sure, because you have a high chance of somehow having an infection. Maybe the infection is really going on and you are the 50% of women that are feeling and also experiencing really the bacterial vaginosis, for example. But the other 50%, they will have no symptoms at all. They don't have like unusual discharge, itching or something. And this is an important factor for basic vaginal and intimate health. So this is actually affecting mainly the front vaginal tract. This is important. When we're seeing the lower and the deeper vaginal tract and like, let's say, the whole gynecological tract with the endometrium, then we are thinking about fertility. And that was our topic. That's where we saw, okay, actually, it should also affect the fertility somehow in a way. And that's where we're starting to think about, okay, how can we solve a problem that a lot of women experience, don't have a solution on, and also a lot of women experience like having problems to get pregnant or planning to get pregnant over a longer period and it's not working out that well, that have no clue that they have a problem there and no symptoms and nothing. I think if you have like a UTI all the time, you know that it is something you should fix for getting pregnant, that it will affect you in a specific way. Or if you really experience the bacterial vaginosis, you know that. But the majority have no symptoms at all. There's just an underlying situation that is leading to inflammation, etc. And what we did with the product is we took women from fertility clinics that were experiencing having problems to get pregnant, and we took women that had like a huge number of babies that are really, really, really fertile. And also people that were just the regular having 1 to 2 children, so the regular birth rate. And we compared to each other. We also did our sequencing. We looked on which kind of strains can we find. And then we looked on what are the characters of the strains that we mainly found in there. And we, for example, looked on antioxidation. We looked on inflammation. We looked on what is it doing with the material. Is the material that is colonized really thick and healthy, or is it more thin layered? What are the differences? And we had different measurements. And based on that, we saw that there are specific strains that always had a positive situation. We also compared strains to each other with putting bad bacteria into the system and just seeing how different strains are pushing away the bad bacteria. Yeah? So how good is the protecting mechanism of the bacteria against the pathogens where we know, and this is something we knew from the science that was going before, that are affecting fertility in a bad way. And that's where we, in the end, found a specific strain set of 6 strains that were the most effective and protecting and also inflammation lowering characteristics for the strains that we were able to found. There were thousands of more strains. We have to say microbiome is not always that easy because you cannot bring in thousands of strains. There are two ways you could do it. One way would be to take a woman that is really fertile and to like take the material and bring the material into a woman that has a problem to get pregnant. This is what another company, I think in Denmark or Sweden, Denmark, I think, was doing a few years ago, having a huge like response in the science network because of the study. But this was N of one study, we have to say. This was like one trial where it actually worked, that a woman that was having problems to conceive was able to conceive after getting the vaginal tissue material from a really fertile woman in. This is good because it's showing, okay, it seems to work. We know that it's also done in the gut, that we have stool transplants. In this way, it was like a vaginal transplant. In our way, we think that this is nothing that is mass convenient because we have so many people struggling with their fertility. Like it's nearly 1/3 of all women right now. When we look on the couples, 1/3 of all couples will experience infertility or fertility issues. You will not be possible to have that many women giving their vaginal material and transplanting it into other women. That's the first problem. The second problem is it will be massively expensive. You will pay like 10,000 of euros or dollars for that. In our way, we did what is called a single strain approach. We built the product strain by strain by strain. But in the end, we had a specific cluster of where we said, okay, this is the cluster that is the most effective that we have right now, that we saw in our research. And this is something where we say, okay, this is also convenient. This is something where we can roll it out into the market, and it's also affordable because this is also really important for us. We want to bring solutions that are effective, but also affordable and accessible, and nothing that is like behind locked clinic doors for $10,000 for the top 1%, where we see, okay, but what is with the other 29% of the people that have a problem? What should they do? So we were like going into this direction. So that's where we brought out the first product called Happy Femme in March 2025. So this is still new, but it took a while to do our research. We are really big fans of understanding the topic and having really final solution, protecting it and then bringing it out and not just doing it halfway somehow. Yeah, that's the story basically of it.
The interesting one there is for Happy Femme. My understanding, it's oral delivery rather than vaginal administration. Why?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. And this was also one of the main hypotheses we had in the early beginning of the research. Is it possible to actually thrive and impact the gynecological ecosystem without using the vaginal way of bringing it in, which is typically done with lactic acid, for example. Yeah, if you have a really acute bacterial vaginosis or infection and you go to your pharmacy, typically you will find a lot of products that are administered vaginal, and it will have a direct impact. That's what the theory actually is. Just saying one thing, for all the women that are thinking lactic acid is the final solution, it is not. Lactic acid is actually something that has like a short time impact of the pH situation. It will drive the pH situation in a specific direction, which is more, good benefit, let's say, because pH is important for the species that are like needing the specific pH score to be able to survive. But this is a really short-term thing. It's like just for a few days changing the pH situation. If you're not doing anything, it will go back into the bad situation again. It will only work if you also bring in the right bacteria. Like without the right bacteria that are actually the producers of the lactic acid, you won't have a long-term holistic solution for it. You will just have like a short symptom impact, maybe. That's it. That's first of all. So second of all,
products like Lactofem, for example, which I think are Lactobacillus. Is this something that people can, I wouldn't say self-treat. Obviously, if you do have an issue, go see a doctor. But if this is something, for example, if you don't have an issue and you're not trying to get pregnant, you're not trying to solve anything at that particular point in time, to use a Lactobacillus product on a regular basis?
Yes, for sure. That's also what our users are doing. So maybe just to come to the question with the oral administration. So that's where we also did, like where we have the clinical studies too. So we have 2 clinical studies that were actually comparing vaginal administration and oral administration. And that's where we saw, because we just tried it, to be honest. It was just like trying to see how it's working. Actually, everyone thought that it's failing totally, so that it's not coming into the gynecological system. But we saw in the end that the colonization between a vaginal input and an oral intake, in the end, the colonization after 30 days of taking it, it was exactly the same. There was no difference at all. And the thing is that we have 3 different ways for the oral way. First of all, there's like a urinary situation where we see that over the urinary system, we also have like a specific washout, and where we see, okay, that this is like connected to the reproductive and gynecological system, and bacteria will also cross over into the tissues of the vaginal and the whole gynecological tract. Second thing is like a smear infection, what it would be called in a bad way, but there's also a crossover from the anal to the vaginal tract. And this crossover also is happening for bacteria that are like helpful for the vaginal system, Lactobacilli. And the third thing is the whole postbiotic situation. And that's what I already described. So if you have like bringing in signal givers from the right bacteria, they also give like signals to growth of the species that are existent, but maybe in a way which there are not many, just a few. And they're having the right signals for growing and populating the system in the reproductive tract and the gynecological tract. These are the 3 basic mechanisms. And that's where we decided, okay, this was not a scientific situation in the end, because we saw, okay, both is working out quite well. This was a convenience situation because we saw, okay, is that we did like requests and everything, like in majority, like 95% said, okay, if I can do like oral intake, that would be way easier than like a vaginal administration, for sure. And then that's where we actually decided to go into this oral direction. And we see that other players in the pharmaceutical market, for example, after we did, you see that behind the closed curtains, also other players are working on that. There's also like a pharmaceutical product in Germany, for example. This is like doing it exactly in the same way, using a bit different species. I don't know. I don't see the research behind that. I was not able to see that. Maybe it's hidden research or something that is not like for everyone, but they do it in the same administration way, which is good to see. It's also working out for them. This is to your question.
Which strains are you using, if you can share?
I can share one because basically the whole mix is protected. So I can tell you one strain, which is called Lactobacillus CA-15, because typically you have like different strains that are called in a specific number. There you have like, you will find hundreds or thousands of strains, and you will see that it's the same species and the same type. It's Lactobacillus. Then you say, okay, this is Lactobacillus crispatus, for example. And then you see, okay, but there are also 10 different Lactobacillus crispatus in there. But sequencing shows that it's like another genetic sequence. It's not the same. It's not the same strain. It's the same species, but it's a different strain. And there we typically just put numbers behind it. And one of the most effective strains that also public research is there for this strain. So it's like, it was publicated. So it's called CA-15. And the CA-15 alone, just the strain alone, was able to populate the gynecological microbiome in a way where we had less inflammation, we had better tissues, thicker tissues, and we saw it was pushing away, just the strain alone was pushing away bad pathogens like Streptococcus or Gardnerella vaginalis. One example.
Interesting. And is there anyone that this is not for, or when should someone pause it?
You also had a question if you can just take it as a regular basic. So yes, you can do. So I have a specific view on nutraceuticals because we are like a nutraceutical, because also it's taken like on this oral way, not the vaginal pharmaceutical product. If you're taking nutraceuticals or micronutrients or whatever, I'm a big fan of doing it with a specific purpose, let's say. Not just taking everything, just somehow you should do it when you see, okay, you would benefit from it right now. That's why I say, okay, for people that they experience that, for example, they have like vaginal health problems, or people that have pain while having sexual intercourse, have a low libido, have irregular or painful cycles. People that had endometriosis, has like microbiome and endometriosis. There are studies out there right now and scientists that open up the theory that endometriosis is not just happening somehow, that endometriosis is the end state of a bad microbial situation, which is resulting in growth, unwanted growth actually, of tissue material in the gynecological or the gut tract. This is like a big theory that we have in science right now. And I think my theory is that it is like that. And in the next 5 years, we will have the final reports and the final studies on that, which are showing that, yeah, that's a microbiome thing. That's not just somehow happening. So this endometriosis, if you are planning to get pregnant or have problems to get pregnant, this is also important. And that's basically it. Also, if you conceived, if you are like your pregnancy is done and you have the birth of the baby, so we know that after every birth, the microbiome will get in a bad state. And we know that women, that's also what we see, women that had more babies, basically with every baby, their microbiome started to get less diverse. It's not saying that it's getting bad, but it's losing the diversity, which is important. The diversity is an important factor for microbiome. And it's getting less and less diverse, which in the end can lead to results like having more problems with vaginal health, for example. And this all are things where you should think about taking it on a regular basis. You don't need to take it if you don't experience anything of that. If you have like a regular cycle, you have like a good hormonal situation and health, you don't have vaginal problems, why should you take it yet? So makes no sense. You also should stop taking it when you are in your pregnancy. That's also what we say, not because it's bad. So there's no risk yet. So there are studies on that. There's no risk factor for taking it in the pregnancy. But what we see is that pregnancies are so different, and we have a pregnancy microbiome. The microbiome over the pregnancy changes. And there is what we tend from our company philosophy, we tend to always bring the body in a natural situation. So if we were able to bring the body into a situation where the fertility was high and the conception was working, so then we have the right basic situation, and actually we want to let the body develop in a free way, in the way where it's actually natural for this specific person in the pregnancy. And that's where we say, okay, there's no negative impact by taking it. So we don't have to be in fear that there's something bad happening. That's not at all. But we want to say, okay, why should you bring in bacteria right now in a situation where your microbiome is like uniquely changing? That's just happening in pregnancy. It's like a unique change of the microbiome. Why should we somehow affect that? So when beforehand everything was fine with our solution, yeah, and fertility was good. Why should we do that? This is like the two situations where I would say you don't need it or you should not take it. For everything else, also massively important entering the menopause and after the menopause, I would actually suggest every woman that is like entering menopause or after menopause, I would suggest every woman to support by taking a bacteria for the gynecological tract. It will have a huge upside for sure.
And you would take this as a course while you're going through menopause because there's all these changes? Is that something that post-menopause you should be taking, on a regular basis, or you take a course, I don't know, once or twice a year? How would you do that?
What we saw is after taking it for 1 month, like just talking about what we saw with our solution, after 1 month taking it, the microbiome was stable in this state, what we actually built up with the solution, for 1 month. Taking it in 1 month, it will be stable for 1 month after that. So basically, you could do it every 2 months. That if you really want to do it in a cost-effective way also, you have this stable situation after taking it 30 days, it will stay for 30 days. Then you should take it again. What we always say is if you have a situation that is really like just a specific time perspective, for example, getting pregnant, or for example, you have issues with your vaginal health, take it as a core over 6 months. That's what we typically suggest. If you say, yeah, I want to do it on a regular basis, for example, women that are in or like in the menopause or after menopause, there is no cycling anymore in this situation. It's not like fluctuating and changing like it's before. There, I would say, yeah, bring in the right bacteria all the time. Make it as a new basis for everyday basis, because it's just important. There are also other examples where I would say, yeah, this is something women in and after menopause should definitely consume, like as an add-on to their normal nutrition when we're talking about micronutrients, for example. Yeah.
Any idea why the diversity is changing as women have more babies?
this is where we're talking about the regular birth. So talking about like a regular birth where the baby is actually going through the birth channel, we have something that is called seeding. Seeding is something where, and this is important for babies. So babies that were seeded, which actually means they're going through the cervix on the tissue, through the birth tract. The whole cervix is actually colonized by billions of bacteria. And this bacteria will colonize the baby. It will colonize the skin. The baby will have also an open mouth while getting born. It also will enter into the mouth. It will actually, this is the basic set that a baby is getting as a bacterial colonization. This is like the regular normal birth set. And it's also entering into the mouth and also into the guts then. It's important for every microbiome, not just the skin. So what we see is that babies that are born through on a natural way and that experience a seeding, that was science was showing in the last years, they have a lower rate of, for example, allergies, lower inflammation. Also, they have somehow, we don't know why, but they have lower obesity rate. It seems like their whole system is working more efficient. Their whole gut system is also working more efficient. And this is having a huge impact on everything that is connected to your immune system. They have for example, allergies is one example, and they have a better immune system. And this is made by those bacteria, which is not made if you have artificial birth, let's say. If you're not a baby's not born on a regular way through the birth channel, you miss out the seeding. And then you have to be lucky if you have a good doctor. They are doing the seeding manual. They are taking the material of the vaginal tract and they're actually smearing it on the neck of the baby and the skin and also putting it into the mouth. This is good. This is a good doctor then. Unfortunately, the most doctors don't do that. Typically, this is something that should be done always. But back to the question, why is it getting less diverse? It seems like with this, by the way, just happening by regular births, if you're having a birth through the birth channel, this mechanism seems to somehow disrupt the microbiome of the woman in a specific way where it's not building up that diverse after it. We don't know why. The theory is that there are specific strains that are given to the baby and strains that it seems like the body thinks they are needed anymore. And this is why diversity is lowering then. And so maybe it's just a theory, but maybe those strains are strains that are not just important for the women's or the female health, or maybe not important at all, but important for the baby then. And this is where the diversity, if you take a woman after the pregnancy, will get lower within the pregnancy. So if you're getting pregnant again, this is what I mean with this unique pregnancy microbiome. The diversity will start to rise again. So it will start to get higher. And there are strains from in pregnancy that you don't have before. It seems like those strains are important for the baby. And this is how it's going. But with every birth, the diversity is going lower and lower. And that's why I say also with the solution from taking the vaginal transplant from one woman to another, doesn't automatically mean that if you take the vaginal transplant from a woman that had 5 babies, for example, is the best thing you can do. Actually, you should take the material from a woman that had 5 babies and is pregnant the 6th time. That would make more sense in my opinion. But basically, if you take it after the 5th or 6th baby, the diversity will be way lower. And that's why I say this N of 1 trial, I don't know if it is really something that can be compared to every woman and every situation, or if it was maybe lucky somehow. But then as it is, yeah.
So we've covered the hormone connection, the product, and just now, what happens to a woman's microbiome with every birth and what her baby receives in the first seconds of life. But there's a piece of this story we haven't reached yet. His team is building a diagnostic tool that could read the state of your uterine microbiome from a simple vaginal swab. No biopsy, no anesthetic, no disruption to the tissue you're trying to protect. We're also getting into what he thinks will be clinically normal at your gynecologist within a decade that doesn't exist yet. And there's an emerging theory about one of the most underdiagnosed conditions in women's health that may reframe it completely. All of that in part 3.
Thank you for joining me on this transformative journey. Your presence in this community is truly valued. Now, you may not realize it, but your words hold immense power. They have the ability to reach others who may benefit greatly from the wisdom shared here. If you found value in what you heard, I kindly ask you to take a moment to subscribe to Biohacking Eve, leave a glowing review on your preferred podcast platform, and share Biohacking Eve with your friends and family. Your support helps spread the message of health optimization for women far and wide. Lastly, I want to express my gratitude to you for investing in yourself. By prioritizing your well-being, you serve as an inspiration to others. I'm eagerly looking forward to bringing you many more exciting episodes, and thank you for being a vital part of our community. Live long and prosper, my friends. The Biohacking Eve Health Optimization for Women podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of the healthcare professionals for any such conditions. In addition, the information on this podcast does not constitute investment or financial advice.